the news has kind of gotten in the way of what I wanted to, how I wanted to start this, but there is news today about NASA. Are you're familiar with?
I haven't seen any new stuff today.
Okay, well, it's in today's newspapers about the New York Times. I mean, about this blue ribbon panel recommending cutbacks to the moon, delays on the moon project, significant, perhaps, cuts to the budget. It says that this blue ribbon panel says that NASA's goals are unrealistic. Is this something we should be worried about?
On the current budget, we could do everything if it was a budget increase.
Okay.
And Norm Augustine that runs that is a very sharp guy, and I talked to him about this whole thing, and so I'm one of their ones they list as an advisor on this thing, I guess. I was not a member of the commission. But here's what it comes down to, and this gets political very, very fast, and it's too bad, but that's the way it is. Because I think NASA, what they're trying to do should be sort of, it can't be above politics, but shouldn't be just a political football. We fought for the International Space Station because that was what was going to let us do long-term research. We couldn't do that on the shuttle. And I've always thought that research is the real reason why we have a space program, learning new things. And they benefit people right here on Earth, whether it's in materials or processes or studies of aging, which I was involved with on the last flight, or whatever. We can only do that with the International Space Station. So back in those days when I was still in the Senate, in fact, I floor managed the station bill when it would come through the Senate for several years before I left the Senate, in support of it and the idea of doing long-term research. We have now, with all the delays that have occurred, and we now have invested in the International Space Station $100 billion. $100 billion invested in that station. And President Bush in 2004 went over to NASA and just made a speech changing NASA's direction, just directing them to go to the moon and Mars.
Right.
And I thought, well, okay, that expands the whole space program, except he said there's no budget increase. So can you imagine being given the job of going to the moon and Mars
without any extra money? Without
any extra money. And so the only place NASA could get money was to cut the research funds out of the station. So here we have a $100 billion investment and not being used for what it was supposed to be used for doing research. It would benefit people right here on Earth. And that to me is wrong. It's a wrong way to go. I talked to Norm Augustine about this, and I think he agreed with it, and I haven't seen their final report. But I hope that they're giving support for the station. If they want to cut back on the moon and Mars, okay, I think a #1 priority should be using what we invested $100 billion in. Then we'll worry about the other things later.
When you say it gets political real fast, and that's what bothers you, you said, what do you mean about that?
Well, I don't like to criticize a former president, but I think Bush was wrong in what he did. What his reasons for it were, I don't know. It was the beginning of an election year in 2004. So that had anything to do with it or not, I don't know. But I just think that was a very, very wrong way to go, of cutting out what we're going to have a benefit from all this huge investment.
Okay. You know, you mentioned research, and it is something that I've heard you talk about for 4 decades?
About 4. We're both getting older.
Yeah, no kidding. But don't you think that time has proven you correct on that, because science has never been more important. U.S. students are actually falling behind other parts of the world in science.
Yep.
So how do we fix that?
I think there are two, well, let me back up, be a little philosophical for a second here. I think there are 2 things that built this country more than anything else. #1 was education. We came out with a better educated general citizenry here than any nation on Earth. The education here was not just for the kids from the castle or the rich kids. It was for everybody. And out of that, we came out with a very well-informed general electorate, which is necessary in a democracy. You have to have that in a democracy. A democracy can't be ruled by a few people. It's the will of the whole people involved with it. And so we wound up with that, particularly in the area of science and technology and math. Our people were better educated than any complete citizenry around the world. Number two, we put more back into basic research. We learned the new things first. And with that educated citizenry in this country, we just catapulted ahead of other nations. Think of when this country started. There's just a few people on the East Coast, and it was only about 120 years. By about 1900, we were recognized as a world leader. And that occurred in about 120 years, almost unbelievable. And I think, if we lose that kind of a lead, I think the nation that will lead the world in the future will be whatever nation emphasizes education and basic research.
So are you a little worried about us slipping in those categories?
We've slipped. Our K-12 education, I headed up a commission for Dick Riley, who was in the last administration he was Secretary of Education. He was concerned about a TIMS study, Third International Math and Science Study. And it showed that it was done over a study done around the world in 41 nations over a 3-year period. And it showed that our kids up to about the 4th grade level were ranked in the top 2 or 3 nations in the world in math and science understanding and technology understanding. By the time our kids get out of high school, they are 2 or 3 from the bottom. We have places like Sri Lanka and South Africa are 2 or 3 of the ones that are behind us. Our kids getting out of high school, as far as math and science go, are not world class right now. And I hate to say that, but unless we correct that, it's going to be very, very difficult for us to be the #1 nation in the world 75 years from now, say. I think we learned the new things first, and with that educated citizenry, we were the ones that, with a little investment, bang, we established whole new industries and businesses that the rest of the world followed. And I think that's just proven itself to be true through the years. And I see now, right now, if we don't, it's difficult. You say, how do we correct this? It's very difficult, because our educational system, K-12, is not run like other nations that are our competitors. Our competitive nations have a nationwide school system, and it's funded and it's run on a national basis. Our school system here in this country is some 14,700 separate school boards in this country, all being independent, doing what they want to do, deciding whether they want to support it with money or whether they don't. It's not a national system. We call it a K-12 system, and it's not a system at all. It's 14,700 independent school boards doing their own thing. What we found in this study that I headed up for over a year or two, and we made our report to Dick Riley back at that time, and what we found was that our teachers, we had 25% of our math teachers in high school were K-12. 25% of them were teaching out of field. They never had any training in teaching math. And 20% of the science teachers were the same way. Another even more disturbing fact was that 30% of both categories in science and math of the teachers, 30% leave the profession within 3 years, and 50% are gone within 5 years. Now you can't have a boiling mess like that and expect to be a leader in the world. Now, fortunately, our higher education system is the best in the world, remains the best in the world. And so we have a few people then that come up through the university, college and university system that take over and have done a pretty good job. But for the long-term future, I think the leadership in the world will go to the nation that leads in not only education of all their people, but in basic research.
I want to change subjects a little bit. This is where I planned to start before the NASA stuff bubbled up. You have had this long and pretty remarkable life. There aren't too many people who can be certain as they enter their old age that they'll be in the history books for hundreds of years. Do you ever, when you have in your reflective moments on that, I mean, does it satisfy you that you've had this life where you've accomplished so very much? Do you think about it much?
Well, I don't think about it all the time, no, but Annie and I have talked about this some, but we've been very lucky. A lot of it is luck in being at the right place at the right time and having the qualifications to do what you have the opportunity to do. And we have, every time our lives have gotten sort of, I won't say static, but every time they've sort of been calmed down, there's been a new opportunity come along that was exciting, and we've been able to take care of those, to take advantage of those opportunities.
If you were lucky, a lot of people would say, well, he was lucky that he came back down in that spacecraft. Didn't the real luck come into play in those 2 wars prior to that?
Yeah.
When you got shot up.
Yeah.
When you took hundreds of bullets.
Yeah. People ask what was what do you think was the most, or I don't know, what was the most tenuous part of your life or whatever. It's got to be in combat, because that's where you're being shot at and you're shooting at other people. And I was in World War II. My plane was hit 5 times, and only one of them was a major hit. The rest of them were single bullet holes, but there was one about the size of a soccer ball in the left wing. That was out of World War II. In Korea, I got hit good 3 times and got hit total 7 times. So was hit by anti-aircraft on 12 times in 2 wars.
Wow.
And the ones in Korea, 3 of them were big. They were explosive shells, and it was just, that really was luck. Because it was, one of them apparently the anti-aircraft shell and explosive shell hit the napalm tank that I was carrying, and that sort of set the thing off early, but it sprayed shrapnel in and put, I don't know, somewhere 250, 300 holes in the airplane, something like that. And
you still have those bullets? I read a Tom Deamer story that said you still have some of those bullets.
I have one of the parts of a fuse of a Japanese, no, this was Korean, I'm sorry, a Korean shell that was dug out of the bottom of the fuel tank on the F-9F,
wow.
The Panther I was flying. Now the Panther had self-sealable tanks. It had this little gel stuff, a layer all around the tank, and this went through and was in the bottom of the tank, and the gel sealed it.
It worked.
It worked,
right.
And I got back because of that. So we had some things like that, and then there's one where another one, there was a place about bigger, I could stick my head and shoulders through it. It hit in the tail, and big hole in the tail, and knocked out the trim system on the airplane, but could still control it and come back though.
Ted Williams called you the bravest son of a bitch I ever met. Did you know him well?
Yeah, I knew Ted very well. He was, when we went out, Ted and I happened
from Korea?
In Korea, yeah. Ted was a recalled reservist, and I was in the regular Marine Corps. And when people went out, they usually teamed them up as sort of a pair to fly together whenever you're on the board to fly that day. And so Ted and I were teamed up because we went out about the same time. And so about half the missions Ted flew, he flew as my wingman. Okay. So I knew Ted very well and kept in touch with him after the war, and visited him a number of times. And
in Florida? In
Florida, and when he was in the hospital out West Coast.
Oh, you saw him when he was,
Yeah. So we kept up with him, and Ted was quite a character.
Yes, he was.
He was a good buddy.
You know the president at all? President Obama?
Yeah, well, I campaigned with him here in Ohio,
okay.
And talked to him then some, and introduced him at several things here, and that's the only real contact I've had with him, though.
Okay. You're hopeful?
Oh, very hopeful, yeah. I think that the healthcare thing is being touted now as a be-all and end-all of whether he's going to have a successful presidency, and I think that overdoes it considerably. But no, I became very impressed with him. I had backed Hillary. I thought she was better qualified. But the time I spent with Obama, I was very impressed with him. I think he's, number one, he's a very, very bright person. He's a very smart person. And one of the things I like too, and this sounds rather strange, he knows what he does not know. And I think that's very hopeful, because that means that he'll put together groups to give him advice in the different fields where he feels he is a little weak, and I like that. I think that's good. I think some of our past presidents, not to mention any names, of course, but some of them have thought that it was an affront that they were thought not to know everything almost, And I think he's aware of what he doesn't know, and he wants to put together good groups to advise him on this. I think that's great. I think he has a great future.
You're 88. How do you feel?
Doing fine. Health's good.
Still walk or
Andy's
exercise?
good. Yeah, Andy and I we don't do it every day. We come close to it. We try and do about a 2-mile walk every day, walking as fast as is comfortable for us, and that seems to do us some
She
good.
your age, Senator?
No, she's older than I am.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. We joke about
She
that.
89?
It's obvious I married an older woman.